出生及成长于美国加州佛利蒙市的黄安立侨务促进委员 Huang， 任职于矽谷高科技公司，热爱台湾，在美国推广行销台湾不遗余力。
Hi, my name is Annie, and I'm Taiwanese American. Both of my parents were born in Taiwan and eventually ended up immigrating to the US where they met. I was born and raised here in California and grew up in a pretty typical Taiwanese American household. I always knew my family came from Taiwan since Ama Gong, they would come over from Taiwan to visit us in the United States. But it wasn't until I was 5 years old when I actually got to go and visit Taiwan for the first time. And since then, I was lucky enough to be able to go back every year or two with my family to visit our relatives. And over the years, I was able to spend time with all my extended family, from my great-grandma to my great-aunts and uncles and cousins, and now even my nieces and nephews. And even with so many people to see and keep up with that are so far away, I'm actually still pretty close to most of them. I think the importance of family is pretty ingrained into our culture, but sometimes it felt difficult to relate to them because of the cultural differences of how we were growing up. For example, I remember this one time we went to the temple to bye, and all the other kids knew what to do, where to kneel and everything, and I was just so confused. Why were people throwing those pairs of red wooded moon blocks on the ground, and what were they looking at? But eventually I learned more and more by just asking questions. I also got to learn about the Aboriginal Taiwanese tribes from a very young age, and how Taiwan itself is a melting pot of a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds. Through all of these experiences, I eventually learned a lot about Taiwanese culture as a kid, but even to this day, there are a ton of things that I don't know about, and when I'm in Taiwan, I'm always asking locals to help me learn a little bit more about what's going on. And the great thing about Taiwanese people is they're so nice and always willing to help out if they can. Even though I look Taiwanese and I'm probably asking a lot of silly questions, locals don't really think much of it, and instead they're really happy to see overseas Taiwanese people coming back to Taiwan to learn about where their family is from. And since my family is from Tainan, I've been able to see and experience a lot of Taiwanese culture and background growing up. I've never spent much time in Taipei, but I know the city life can be pretty different than what I'm used to in the South. And most people in Tainan speak Taiwanese, so I try my best to pick up some phrases when I'm there. That way I can at least guess what's going on or what people are talking about. Because growing up in the United States, we primarily speak English, and also at home I primarily speak English, so I didn't really have the opportunity to practice the language as a kid. My parents did put me in Chinese school starting in first grade, which actually is kind of late, but it's all good. Looking back, it turned out to be super helpful because now at least I can read and type in Zhuing, even though I can't read all the actual Chinese characters. Since I actually ended up quitting Chinese school just a few years later, because I've never really been the type of person to sit in a classroom setting, and I always felt it was more effective to actually go to Taiwan and be immersed in the language. And sometimes when I was in Taiwan, I actually took a few language classes when I went back, just to try and improve my Mandarin when I was there. And I spent a lot of school breaks going back to Taiwan, trying to learn about all the things that couldn't be taught in the classroom, such as Taiwanese pop culture, the latest trends, doing those typical Taiwanese photo shoots, and of course, everyone's favorite is the Taiwanese food. And everyone knows Tainan is known for its small dishes, whether it's street food or grabbing a bite at the night market, there's always something to eat at any time.
经由父母亲及在台亲友的学习互动，以及在美国公立学校、中文学校同学及同侪间的影响，黄安立逐渐形塑他的身份认同——台裔美国人，并且开始与志同道合的朋友在美国加州以实际行动规划办理夏令营，透过活泼生动的课程，让更多美国的台美青少年建立他们的身份认同。
I think personally my first Taiwanese identity crisis happened when I was in middle school, because I started to see some new kids that were coming from Taiwan as their families immigrated to the United States. And by that point, I had gone to Taiwan multiple times and I felt pretty strongly about identifying as Taiwanese. But when I met these kids who were literally from Taiwan, it was pretty obvious, like, we're actually pretty different people. And that's when I realized there's actually a huge difference between being Taiwanese versus being Taiwanese American. And going through the rest of junior high and high school, there was a pretty large majority of students whose families were originally from Taiwan, whether they were like me, who were born and raised in the US to Taiwanese parents, or they came over from Taiwan to have an American education. The one common thing that we all had in common was Taiwan. In high school, we would have a week where students could celebrate their culture, and we had like a flag parade thing, kind of like at the Olympics, where kids would walk behind the country that they identified with. And even though I went to a public US high school, every year the Taiwan flag would always have the most people behind it. They were cheering, shouting, and overall just being really proud to be Taiwanese. But when I was in college, I started to realize that I was going to start having less school breaks to visit Taiwan once I started working and would no longer really have summer or winter breaks anymore. And I started to think about other ways that I could stay connected to Taiwan even though I was here in the US, in case opportunities to visit the motherland became less available. So during my last year of college, some of my high school friends finally convinced me to volunteer for a Taiwanese American summer camp where I would have the opportunity to teach kids about Taiwanese culture. And I actually knew about this summer camp because my younger sister had been attending as a camper, but I previously preferred to actually go to Taiwan instead of attending summer camp back when I was growing up. But now that I was starting to work, I didn't really have all those weeks to go abroad, and that's why I decided to start attending summer camp as a camp counselor. So I love working with little kids, and over the years I began to realize a lot of the next generation of Taiwanese Americans might have never even been to Taiwan before, or they might only be half Taiwanese or a quarter Taiwanese since their parents met here in the US and maybe only one side of the family is from Taiwan. And now I start to realize there are more and more mixed Taiwanese kids, which makes it even more important for them to understand their Taiwanese identity and their culture and background of that part of the family.
除了形塑北加州年轻台美人的身份认同外，黄安立2019年分别担任北加州台湾文化节及国际童玩节的负责人，与北加州台湾侨社共同合作，引进年轻团队的热忱与活力，将台湾传统及创新文化介绍给主流社区，增进台湾国际能见度，更促进不同族裔之间互动交流。
I started to meet more of the Taiwanese community here in the US and eventually helped put on 2 of the Taiwanese festivals in the Bay Area. The first one is the Taiwanese American Culture Festival, which is held in Union Square in San Francisco every year in May, which is Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And this area in San Francisco is heavily tourist focused, so the main purpose of the Taiwanese American Culture Festival is to introduce non-Taiwanese people to our culture through activities, food, and performances. The other festival is called the Kids Fun Festival, where we invite kid performance groups from Taiwan to come and showcase what variety of arts and culture there is there in Taiwan and introduce it to the Taiwanese community here in the Bay Area. All these activities would not be possible without the help of both OCAC and the Culture Center of TECO. We have received so much help from both the Culture Center of Milpitas as well as the Culture Center of El Monte in Southern California, not only helping us apply for grants from the Taiwan government, but also allowing us to use their culture centers, auditoriums, and grand ballrooms for our activities. I'm really impressed by the amazing relationship that all the culture centers have together, whether they're helping us down in LA or up here in San Francisco. As a second or third or fourth generation Taiwanese American, sometimes the language barrier might be difficult, whether it's speaking or filling out documents in Chinese if you can't read and write, but everyone at the Culture Center is so helpful and willing to help out. I think it's really important for young overseas Taiwanese to learn more about Taiwan, and I'm really lucky to have even been able to go back to Taiwan with my friends multiple times with the help of OCAC. Even though we all already know each other from the States, with the support of OCAC, we're actually all able to go back and experience Taiwan firsthand together. OCAC has given us multiple opportunities to not only go visit tourist attractions in Taiwan, but also get to sit down with the president or the vice president of Taiwan, where we could ask them anything we have on our minds about Taiwan. As you can see, there are a lot of opportunities for the next generation to get involved with learning more about your Taiwanese identity, from local grassroots organizations in your local community, all the way to chatting with the president of Taiwan.
对于与他具有相同背景的台美年轻人，黄安立鼓励他们用心认真体验台湾之美，并将优质的台湾事物介绍引进美国，促进台美之间的情谊，共创互利双赢。
As a Taiwanese American, I think it's pretty cool to see that the US and Taiwan have many things in common. Similar to the US, Taiwan is a very open-minded country. They cherish human rights. They have a lot of overlap in like trade, military, and even business relations. There are so many opportunities out there to introduce aspects of Taiwan to the United States. For example, do you guys remember when the first ever boba shop opened? I don't think so, because they're just popping up left and right. And they're everywhere now. And now I feel like the Taiwanese pineapple scene or pineapple cakes are starting to gain traction. So your crazy idea could be the next big thing to bring a piece of Taiwan to your home country, whether it's the United States or another country elsewhere. So don't be afraid to make the jump. Taiwanese people around the world should be very proud of Taiwan, as they're doing really amazing things. They have a great healthcare system and have really proven to be the golden standard during this ongoing pandemic. Many governments have taken notice, and more people are starting to recognize Taiwan to be an amazing hidden gem of an island. I actually got to spend the last half of last year there, and I'll actually be heading back again soon. Over the numerous times I've been to Taiwan growing up, I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to see different parts of the island, but I never really had the chance to explore more of the nooks and crannies and go deeper in the Taiwanese roots. One of the big lessons I've learned the last few times I visited was growing up in one part of the US really only exposed you to a certain industry, really. For example, if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, you're exposed to a lot of high tech your whole life. If you're in the LA area, a lot of entertainment, or in East Coast New York area, a lot of finance. But in Taiwan, it's such a smaller area, and you can be so easily exposed to all the different industries and more that you've never even thought you could learn about. And so if you ever have the opportunity to spend some time and learn more about Taiwan, I think now is a great time, as the pandemic has changed the world of remote work, really. And it's the perfect chance to go check out what life in Taiwan is like. Once travel starts to open back up, I hope everyone will come and visit Taiwan. Whether or not you are Taiwanese, Taiwan is welcome to everyone, and I hope to see you there. Bye!